Yaron we discovered each other. Actually, it's amazing to me that in writing the book we didn't come across techaviv as such an incredible story. And Yaron, I think,
doesn't work.
Change the battery.
Turn it on. Yeah, it's on battery.
Battery.
No?
Right.
I use this one.
Yeah, that'll work. And that one's better than that one. That'll work.
Doesn't work.
You guys see over the back?
No.
Try the other one.
Yeah. Let me turn on the bottom.
That work?
Yeah.
Better? Okay. So Yaron, I think you saw it. They saw Dan on CNBC.
Yeah.
Carl video contacted us, and since then he's got us on a world tour for techaviv. And this is a very special moment for me because this book was actually launched on November 4th, just 21 days ago. And since then, Dan and I have been traveling around the United States. I just got back. I saw Yaron at an event sponsored by Newsweek and the Council on Foreign Relations just a few days ago. And we've been traveling around talking about Startup Nation. And for me, this is exciting because this is my first chance to come back to the Startup Nation and talk to the Startup Nation. I mean, you are, in fact, in the words of Bibi Netanyahu, he spoke at the UJA conference and he said, "We are the Startup Nation." Got big applause. So we were excited about that plug. And we're probably the only book that's plugged both by Bibi Netanyahu and by Fareed Zakaria of CNN, who said that every Arab leader, every Arab businessman and so on should read this book and named it Book of the Week.
Startup Nation.
Startup Nation.
Innovation.
And so Dan and I get a number of questions. One is, how did you end up writing this book? Another is kind of, David alluded to, who are you to write this book? And I would add, I guess the most recent question is, how did you become a bestseller? And I want to tell this story in terms of 3 words in the title of the book: startup, story, and miracle. But first, about how we ended up writing this book. Dan Senor actually is my brother-in-law. We don't say that in the book, but it's true. And Dan, going back all the way, it really started in 2001. When Dan was studying at Harvard Business School, he became the first HBS student to bring the first mission of HBS students to Israel. He was amazed. He already knew how great Israel was in terms of startups and everything. That was the end of the boom time. Harvard Business School. And he brought this group there. There were only probably 20 people. Only 3 of them were Jewish. People from India, from Portugal, from France, all were studying at Harvard Business School. And they were amazed at what they saw. And since then, Dan and I have been talking for a long time about, what's going on here. And actually, it was Dan's idea to write the book because he's sitting in New York. I'm sitting in here. I'm writing at the Jerusalem Post. Of course, I'm a journalist. I write about problems. I mean, that's what journalists do. They write about what's wrong. And I would write column after column, actually mostly not about economics, but some about the economy. And when I would write about the economy, it was more, the things that needed to be fixed. But it took Dan coming, looking from outside and seeing how amazing it was to say, somebody's got to explain this. And we looked around for a book, and there was no book. I looked in Hebrew, he looked in English, and we were amazed that there was no book. So we decided to write it. Now, in terms of, who we are, Dan actually has some business background. He went to business school. He started a private equity firm. He worked at the Cairo Group. He's invested in some Israeli startups. I come to it more as a journalist, but this gets to the story aspect. But the first, startup. Now, this part, but I'm dying for this book to come out in Hebrew because I think that a lot of Israelis will learn a lot about their own countries from this book. That's one thing that's interesting about it, and for us to write it. because, you know, I've lived here for the last 15 years, and we kind of think we know this story. We know Israel's good at tech. We're proud of it. You know, there are polls asking, you know, what institutions do you like most, are you most proud of, or you most respect in Israel? And, you know, it's the Army, it's the Supreme Court, and it's high tech, basically, are the leading answers to that. So we know about tech, we're proud of it, but I don't think that even Israelis really appreciate how good we are at tech. That we have the most startups in the world per capita. That maybe we know. But do people know that venture capital, I mean, of course, people can do startups, but the ultimate measure is, will anybody invest in them? And this measurement is not by some pro-Israel organization. The venture capital community is a pile of dollars looking for great deals anywhere in the world. It flows like water to the best deals. It's not sentimental, and in fact, you know, Europe, where we don't necessarily have a lot of friends, European venture capitalists invest more in Israel than in any European country. And you look at the venture capital total, Israel gets 2.5 times the United States per capita, 30 times Europe, 80 times India, and 300 times China. And so we're a giant in terms of venture capital. And this is, I would argue, the key measure of success. I'm not saying that startups in Israel have a higher or lower failure rate. We don't have data on that. Be interested if we could ever figure that out. But I'm ready to say that it's about the same, and it's a failure rate that's very high, because that's the nature of startups. But this venture capital metric is a key one for measuring how successful we are. Another is that we have the highest, by far, level of investment in R&D in the world, 4.8%. That's almost double kind of the next tier of countries. And that's amazing. And what people don't understand about this, a professor at Harvard named Ricardo Hausman, who heads up a Center for World Development at Harvard, explained to us that, you know, most people when they talk about R&D, they say, well, okay, you know, Dan was on this Newsweek panel and they were saying, you know, we got to put more money into research and development. You know, the tendency is when they talk about innovation is let's throw money at it. But what this professor was telling us is that it's not so simple. That the reason why Israel has so high research and development figures, and we're talking civilian R&D, not military, is that Israel is capable of absorbing that R&D. You can throw money at innovation, but if you don't have companies that are capable of using that money effectively, you effectively can't spend it. And that, it's really more the fact that we have so many startups that we're able to spend so much on R&D. So that's the startup part. That's what we call the gee whiz part. But what's exciting is, you know, going around the United States, and our book, you know, people think that a book about, you know, Israeli high tech, they think it's about, you know, a lot of stories of companies, that it's like a survey of different startup companies, or you're going through the sectors, you know, biotech, clean tech. This book is neither of those things. We don't try to comprehensively cover, you know, all the companies. There are lots of great stories we didn't tell. What we try to do is tell the story of the whole thing through stories. And just one story we tell in the book is of a company called Fraud Sciences that you may have heard of, that had an exit in 2007. And we tell the story of Scott Thompson. Scott Thompson, as you could guess, not particularly Jewish, is head of a company called PayPal, the largest credit card, you know, online processing company in the world. They were bought by eBay, and eBay, the main investor in eBay is Benchmark Capital. Benchmark was, of course, looking around Israeli startups, and they came across this tiny startup of 50 guys called Fraud Sciences. So they asked their in-house expert on fraud, on credit card fraud, you know, could you please evaluate this company? And Scott Thompson has certainly never been to Israel, maybe never met an Israeli, was asked to meet Shvat Saked, the founder of Fraud Sciences. So Spot's in there. He probably, not looking very impressive. Looking like one of PayPal's junior engineers, a young guy. Scott Thompson, president of PayPal, doesn't have a lot of time.